Welcome to the Britain-Palestine Project podcast, part of our wider mission to promote peace with justice, security, and equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians. I'm Deanna Safier, writer, podcaster, and events manager here at the Britain-Palestine Project. You'll hear from historians, diplomats, activists, and witnesses as we examine urgent humanitarian and political issues and unpack the complexities, confront the truths, and explore what a just and peaceful future could look like. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Here at the Britain-Palestine Project, we work on peace with justice and equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians. The mission is acknowledging Britain's continuing historic responsibilities to uphold equal rights for the Israeli and Palestinian people through popular education and advocacy, and to convince the British government to recognize the state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. So let me start by telling you first of all, that Theresa and I have already cried several times in the practice session. So we hope you give us a little bit of leeway, because this topic at this time is just, it's incredibly emotional. And we've decided that as much as we will try to remain professional, if you're unaffected while talking about what these children are going through, then it might be time to think of a new career. So please do forgive us if we do break down. We're going to try not to. Teresa Bailey is a semi-retired consultant child and adolescent psychotherapist. She spent 30 years working in children's mental health services in the National Health Service with children of all ages, along with their parents, foster carers, and siblings, which to me sounds like possibly one of the most difficult jobs on the planet. She's been editor of the Journal of Child Psychotherapy and is currently the series editor for independent psychoanalytic approaches with children and adolescents. In the 1980s, she worked in Tanzania with South African child refugees and young ex-detainees who had been tortured. She's a founding member of the UK Palestine Mental Health Network, which is how we found her in order to speak on this topic today. And recently she set up a group for child psychotherapists, Palestine UK child psychotherapists, who are campaigning for their professional organization to speak out and take a stand for children and families being killed, starved, maimed in the genocide. So I just want to thank you so much. I reached out to you and said, I absolutely think it's so important that we do a webinar on mental health in children in Gaza. It's a situation that was dire previous to the recent escalation of violence, and so we really are interested to hear how things, I presume, have worsened since. So I'm going to hand over to you, Theresa. I'm going to be bringing up some photos as well to support her presentation. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Good afternoon, everybody. Deanna, thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the impact on children of the war being waged against Gaza. Before I start my presentation, I would like us to look at some photos of children in Gaza. Not their shredded bodies, their limbless torsos, their bloody dead faces. Let's remember their beauty, their need to play, to dance, smile, cuddle their grandma, wrestle with their dad, chase their friends, sink into the arms of their mum. Just like all children around the world. And keep in mind, these are little ones with developing brains and developing bodies, just like our own children and grandchildren. Remember the beautiful little round head of an infant, the way they grip your little finger. Think of the toddler falling on her bottom repeatedly as she tries her first steps. The little boy who wants you to admire his dance moves. The teenage girl adored by her dad as she pirouettes for him in her new clothes. This is what we're thinking about today children with dreams, hopes, silly jokes, inventive play. I would like to share with you some of the voices of the children from Gaza. The Palestine Trauma Center in Gaza collected up some questions from the children they work with. As we read through these questions, think about how many of their questions could you answer? And what would you tell your own children? After we die, will I hear your voice? When I die, will they put me in a grave with my mum and dad? When it rains, will we drown in the tent? When they bomb the tent, will we burn? Why do they always bomb us? If they bombed someone while I was walking next to him, would I be martyred? When a missile hits us, will I feel it? When a missile hits us, do we feel pain or die immediately? I don't want to die in pieces. Will the dogs that ate the dead bodies of the martyrs turn into humans? Do children who have their legs amputated grow new legs? Why is the boy's face covered in blood? When will we die and get rid of the bombing and the Israelis? Do the Israeli pilots who bomb children have children? Every day you say that tomorrow the war will end. How many years have we been at war? I want to go to heaven because there is no fear or war and it has everything. When will we stop waiting and standing in line for fresh water and salty water? When will we go back to school? When will we have our room back and the displaced people return to their homes? When will the war end? When will the destruction and death end? Deanna, could we stop the photos just for a moment, please? There's just something I'd like to say before I begin the presentation. Ideally, this presentation would be done by a Palestinian colleague, so many of whom have the expertise and knowledge to do this, but are either dead, have been abducted and are in detention in Israel, or who have no access to the internet. I send them my deepest respect and solidarity. I would like to acknowledge the exceptional work of Professor Nadra Shalhoub-Kevorkian, especially her work on the concept of unchilding, of Dr. Sama Jabra and her work on child trauma, as well as the work of Dr. Yasser Abu-Jameh on the war in children in Gaza. I would like to honour the courage of Palestinian colleagues, those health professionals who are still alive, in their work to rescue and treat the children of Gaza. This includes the men and women of the Palestine Trauma Center. I honour the memory of those who've been murdered and those who are still alive, but incarcerated in Israeli jails and subjected to torture. Why is this clearly a war on babies, children and families? The state of Israel is currently not allowing baby formula into Gaza. Why? It has systematically destroyed nurseries, schools, universities in wanton and barbaric scholasticide. Why? Why are sick children with cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, children with limbs blown off, malnourished, starving, left without medication, chemotherapy, insulin, anaesthesia for operations and amputations, pain relief. Why are children with brain trauma and horrific shrapnel wounds not having treatment? Because hospitals and all their medical equipment have been destroyed. Doctors and health staff have been murdered and abducted or tortured. You may have seen the Channel 4 programme, Gaza, Doctors Under Attack, originally commissioned by the BBC, but they then refused to broadcast it. It was broadcast, as I said, by Channel 4. Israel has destroyed all rehabilitation programmes in Gaza. Let's remind ourselves that this is deliberately inflicted trauma, what a friend and member of the Irish Mental Health Network, the late Eamon McMahon, called the careful maiming of children, referring to the targeting of babies and children by snipers. Mark Perlmutter, a surgeon from the United States who volunteered at the European Hospital in Khan Yunis, said, "No child gets shot twice by mistake." Almost half of Palestinians in Gaza are under 18. 70% of those killed since October 2023 were women and children. Gaza's government media office reports that more than 3,500 children below the age of 5 years face imminent death by starvation. 1.1 million children daily lack the minimum nutritional requirements for survival. There are 10,000 cases of acute malnutrition and 1,600 of severe acute malnutrition. This was published in The Guardian on the 2nd of May 2025. Even before the genocide, around half of children in Gaza suffered from symptoms of ongoing trauma because of the repeated devastating attacks on the area. Things like bedwetting, behavioural problems, sleeping difficulties, severe depression and suicidality. Malnutrition in children lowers their immunity to diseases and has irreversible consequences on their health and development. 1 in 4 children now suffer from chronic diarrhea, pulmonary infections and rampant skin diseases. At least 4,000 children have lost one or more limbs. When I say lost, I mean they've been blown off or shot off. It's not easy to have children evacuated from Gaza for specialist medical treatment. Of course, if Israel had not destroyed the healthcare system, they could have been treated in Gaza. The following countries have offered life-saving treatment if Israel will allow them to be evacuated: Italy, Spain, Luxembourg, the USA, Romania, Slovakia, Qatar, Pakistan, Egypt, Belgium, Malta, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Jordan, Lebanon, and Malaysia. The WHO evacuated 20 children in March this year. According to Agence France-Presse, between 216 and 300 children have been evacuated since March. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says that 2,500 children need immediate evacuation to avoid imminent death. The UK has accepted 2 children from Gaza. And these children do not have war injuries, they have other immediate needs. Child mental health and trauma. So we've had some facts about the physical attacks on babies and children. What about the psychological consequences? Children need love, protection, laughter, families, communities, connectedness, friends, play, toys, exercise, food and water, education to thrive, and language, of course. 2 of the greatest fears all tiny children have, conscious or unconscious, whatever their circumstances, class, race, are the terror of abandonment and the fear of obliteration. Over time, all children in good enough environments have conscious or in good enough environments, will have repeated experiences of physical stability, loving, consistent responsiveness from the caregiver, not having to wait too long for that response, and the opportunity to test out their first steps towards independence. This allows them to develop a feeling of internal security and integrity, the sense of home as a safe place, a haven from the outside world, and a belief in the capacity of their parents and carers to protect them. The most natural, instinctive thing we'd all do to calm ourselves and others is to stroke, cuddle, rock, and soothe. This gives a feeling of safety, love, and protection. Children in Gaza, whose homes and lives are constantly under threat or attack, live with primary sources of terror, abandonment, and obliteration. And these are not just early internal world, primitive, ordinary infantile responses on the developmental path to the next stage of life. For the children of Gaza, these are real fears of real abandonment and real obliteration coming from the external world. Imagine being 3 years old, completely dependent on the adults who love and protect you, losing those loving adults suddenly and in the most terrifying way possible. Your mum, who comforted you when you fell over, is no longer there. The dad who played with you, gone, suddenly, forever. Your siblings, cousins, aunties and uncles, grandparents, all gone. Think how it is for us as adults to mourn the loss of a loved one. We have words for our sorrow and grief. When that loss is sudden and traumatic, it's hard enough to bear in our materially comfortable world. To lose their source of protection and love is a disaster for a child, wherever they are. Put that child in an environment of bombing, rockets, fire, guns, nowhere to shelter, no place of safety, no loving parent left. Now take away all their food. These children suffer from mutism, wetting. They are frozen in fear. They soil. They have nightmares, uncontrollable trembling, constant terror. We've seen the distress and the terror of these children on our TV screens. Young children, too young to know what's happening, will sense something amiss, pick up their parents' anxiety as they anticipate the arrival, not knowing when it will be, of the jets, the bombs, and the lethal quadcopters. They are forced to watch as schools, hospitals, homes are destroyed in front of them. Any parent under these horrific circumstances would be forgiven for not being able to provide the most natural instinct, hugging, rocking, reassuring their terrified children. For parents, they are confronted with their own helplessness, distress, and impotence. Their humiliation, their inability to protect their home and their children, their distress are exposed for all to see. Their helplessness in the face of the Israeli war machine reduces parents to a state of impotence. The child's developmental need to believe in their parents' omnipotence and capacity to protect them is shattered forever, damaging the important sense of safety that this belief once held for them. Instead of it coming gradually, naturally, over time, it is destroyed prematurely in the most frightening way. Children's sudden, rapid loss of confidence in their parents to protect them comes prematurely, before the natural stage of individuation. When the home and everything in it that has been created, crafted, woven, painted, built, is bombed into rubble, it is a reflection of the worthlessness in the eyes of the destroyer, of the child herself. Since October 23, Entire families have been eradicated, and sometimes just a single child from the family survives. Over 39,000 children have lost a parent. At least 17,000 have lost both parents. Thousands who've lost parents were pulled from under the rubble. Imagine being bombed as a tiny child, then buried under rubble and dust for hours, in the dark, maybe in silence, or with the screams of the injured or the calls of the rescuer, if you haven't lost your hearing after the deafening noise of the rocket exploding. Small children in Gaza have been forced to think about death. In normal circumstances, children don't have a concept of death till about roughly 5 years of age. Children in Gaza are faced with the threat of death 24 hours a day, their own and that of the people who look after them. Children and young people in Gaza have had no education for almost 2 years. Many have stopped speaking and have regressed in development. Malnutrition means they are constantly tired and unable to play. So not only is there a war on children's bodies, but at the same time, a war on their minds. Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah, head of paediatrics at Nasser Hospital, has said, quote, "I can't begin to describe how bad things are. Right now, we have enough formula for about 1 week. But we also have infants outside the hospital without any access to milk. It's catastrophic. This whole generation is being targeted. They will suffer from memory problems, developmental delays. And the problem is, even if nutrition becomes available later on, the damage is permanent," unquote. Children in situations of uncertainty, danger, the possibility of imminent injury or death, theirs or their parents' caregivers, do not have the opportunity for normal development, ordinary separation, gradual individuation in the context of a secure home. These are denied them. Ordinary responses to fear or danger are not available to them. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote a very important book called The Body Keeps the Score, wrote in 2014, quote, "The body responds to extreme experiences by secreting stress hormones, meant to give us strength and endurance to respond to extraordinary conditions. People who actively do something to deal with the disaster, rescuing loved ones or strangers, transporting people to a hospital, being part of a medical team, pitching tents or cooking meals, utilize their stress hormones for their proper purposes. Helplessness and immobilization keep people from using their stress hormones to defend themselves. When that happens, their hormones are still being pumped out, but the actions they're supposed to fuel are thwarted. They keep fueling fight, flight, freeze responses. In order to return to proper functioning, this persistent emergency response must come to an end," unquote. Dr. Bruce Perry, a psychiatrist from the USA, has researched and written widely on childhood trauma. And he describes trauma as an experience that overwhelms a child's ability to cope. And he says that trauma doesn't just leave emotional scars, it rewires the brain, especially in children. Trauma is not just the event itself, but the child's experience of it. And children are especially vulnerable because their brains are still developing. One of Dr. Perry's major contributions is explaining how trauma impacts on brain development. The brain develops from the bottom up: brainstem, midbrain, limbic system, cortex. A traumatized child often operates from the lower brain areas in survival mode: fight, flight, or freeze. These are survival responses. In trauma, this system can be chronically activated. In non-stop trauma, it is activated non-stop. It leads to dysregulation because trauma can impair self-regulation. Children may appear hyperactive, inattentive, or aggressive, a reflection of dysregulated stress responses. Graham Music is a psychotherapist and author who's written extensively about developmental trauma, attachment theory, and the impact of early life experiences on psychological development. One of his key contributions is his focus on in utero trauma, the psychological and emotional effects of experiences in the womb. In the context of in utero trauma, Music writes that prenatal experiences can profoundly shape a person's psychological state and emotional well-being later in life. This concept is rooted in the growing body of research, suggesting that experiences during pregnancy, particularly in the first trimester, can have long-lasting effects on a person's mental health and behaviour. So trauma can be the result of prenatal stress. So this may be due to high levels of stress in the mother during pregnancy, which can negatively affect the developing fetus. This might include altered brain development, heightened stress responses, and changes in the baby's emotional regulation capacity. Early attachment disruptions, even before birth, can influence later relational patterns. A lack of security or the presence of anxiety in the prenatal environment could lead to difficulties in emotional regulation, trust, and forming relationships later in life. Trauma experienced by the mother during pregnancy can directly impact the developing fetus's nervous system. In cases of severe maternal trauma or extreme emotional stress, the fetus might be exposed to high levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, which can interfere with the development of the brain, specifically areas related to stress regulation, mood control, and attachment. So trauma can be transmitted from a mother to her baby in utero through a variety of mechanisms. These hormones, the stress hormones, can cross the placenta and affect the developing fetus. Additionally, maternal trauma can also impact on the physical health and well-being of the baby during pregnancy, potentially causing complications such as low birth weight or preterm birth. The emotional and psychological impact of trauma on the mother can also affect her ability to provide consistent and nurturing care to her baby after birth, leading to further negative effects on the child's development. A child who's terrified may be hypervigilant, scanning the sky constantly for threats. The child is in emergency survival mode. The sky may once have been a place to fly kites, to dream, under which to play. Now it is a place from which death descends, from which incessant noise haunts every waking and sleeping hour. Any time a bomb might fall, a jet will scream by, a quadcopter with its death rattle can shoot at any time. These quadcopters often pick people off who've been bombed and survive, and who then scramble to escape from their tent or shelter. Bruce Perry says that healing of trauma can only happen in the context of safe, predictable, nurturing relationships. The most powerful tool we have is connection. Therapeutic, educational, or parenting help, supports, works best when they are relationship driven. Perry says, quote, "The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from trauma and thrive," unquote. But what if your whole family has been obliterated? You cannot reason or help such a child at the point at which they are in such a dysregulated state. They first need help to make them feel safe and calm. Impossible in Gaza. There is no safety. There is no calm. Any treatment trauma is impossible as there is not respite from the bombing, the rockets, the quadcopters, the fear, the smell of blood, the smell of decomposition and sewerage. Perry's trauma treatment model, which would be delivered in circumstances where the trauma is not going on, as it is in Gaza, is the neurosequential model of therapeutics, where interventions are sequenced based on the brain's developmental trajectory, starting with the lower order brain regions, like the brainstem and limbic system, and then progressing to higher order regions, like the cortex. So he suggests, and these are things which clinicians and healthcare workers are doing in Gaza with children. I mean, all over Gaza. So he suggests you start with regulation, which includes rhythm, rhythmic movement, sensory experiences like movement, dancing. Only then can children move to relating in the context of safe and responsive relationships. And only then can they engage in cognitive tasks and talk therapy. So, as I've said, these are all techniques that are already used by the brave people who work across Gaza, and in particular in the Palestine Trauma Center in Gaza. So the mental health toll on children means anxiety, depression, not PTSD, because there is no post. The trauma is ongoing and relentless. Nightmares, bedwetting, hypervigilance. And when you think about bedwetting, think about the lack of nappies, water, soap, the inability to wash the bedding if they have bedding. Developmental regression, which means that children regress to an earlier developmental phase and behave in more infantile ways than their chronological age would suggest. There are suicidal thoughts in children as young as 8. So children repeatedly exposed to bombing, grief, and fear develop deep and lasting psychological wounds. The freeze, fight, or flight becomes a default state. This can lead to an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. This is a region of the frontal lobe, which is crucial for decision-making, reasoning, planning, and memory. And it also plays a vital role in emotional regulation, expression, personality expression, and social behavior. So this interrupts play. An overactive amygdala. The amygdala is a structure in the brain which plays a crucial role in processing emotions, particularly emotions of fear and anxiety. It also contributes to memory, decision-making, and the freeze, fight, or flight response. It helps us detect threats, learn from emotional experiences, and link emotions to memories. But of course, it needs the space to be able to process, which the children don't have. Persistent increased cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone, can have lifelong health impacts. Perry goes on to say that a child under 3 months living in fear, chaos, unpredictability, adversity, even if taken out of the environment, will continue to live as if they were still in that chaos, fear, and adversity, unless they can get specialist help. This is why evacuation is so essential. So incessant airstrikes, bombs, sniper shootings, the threat of quadcopters and noisy buzzing drones overhead 24 hours a day can fundamentally alter a child's brain. The fight, flight, freeze response becomes the norm, impacting memory, learning, impulse control, and their future. In 2023, in UNICEF Save the Children reports, they say, quote, "Every child in Gaza is living through trauma." Gaza is home to over 1 million children, many of whom have known only war. And since late 2023, Gaza has seen levels of destruction and humanitarian collapse caused deliberately, not experienced in the world for decades. Previous protective factors are no longer present in a continuous, predictable way, in a continuous onslaught. So safe adult attachment is disrupted. The return to routine, which helps with supporting trauma recovery, is not possible because the schools are all gone. Access to psychosocial support is there, and it's provided, I know, both across the West Bank and in Gaza. Expressive arts, play, group therapy are all essential to a child's healing, but they, I imagine now, are few and far between. But they are there, and courageous healthcare professionals are still providing this. Finally, we need to come on to the report by the Defence for Children Palestine called "Starving a Generation." And I quote from the report, "The world has watched Palestinian children starve to death in real time since the early days of Israel's genocide in Gaza, and refused to take meaningful action to save their lives. The starvation occurring today in Gaza will have a lasting, catastrophic impact on Palestinian children and families for generations." That's from Miranda Cleland, advocacy officer at DCIP, Defence for Children International Palestine. Doctors Against Genocide warn of long-term and often irreversible effects, including stunted growth, neurological damage, weakened immune systems, and permanent cognitive impairment. Again, quoting Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah, head of paediatrics at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where many of the children in the report received treatment, said in an interview with Doctors Against Genocide, and speaking about 2-year-old Amro, a severe acute malnutrition patient, quote, "Look at the vacant eyes of the child. You can see a lot of questions. Where is my mother? Where is my father? What is the crime I did to be punished like that? Children like Amro cannot cry. Staff dealing with the child feel so sad, and they are crying because of that sadness they feel for him." Unquote. The report asserts that Israeli forces and officials have systematically and deliberately targeted food production and distribution systems, attacked humanitarian convoys, and blocked aid from entry into Gaza. It also documents the deaths of children in areas such as northern Gaza, which were entirely cut off from aid and supplies. Families report being unable to feed their children, and mothers themselves were too malnourished to breastfeed, as formula was unavailable. So there is no safe place, no secure base. There is the loss of parental protection, along with humiliation and shame. Terrifying adults visiting violence upon the family is both shocking and outrageous. Children are faced with trauma, the violent wrenching away of the family, the home, and all it represents for them. Let's not forget the teenagers, who will also need to develop physical and psychological defences, which may include isolation, rage at perceived slights from others, the inability to have physical contact, withdrawal from the world, nightmares, wetting and soiling, mutism, depression, excessive bravado, mania, aggression, hatred of vulnerability in others, dissociation, substance misuse, the list goes on. The routine sadism and targeted assaults on children are part of the systematic brutalization of children in order to break their spirit. Hyper-alertness, a strong startle response, anger, fear, nightmares and flashbacks flourish in an environment where there is no secure base externally. There is no space to pause and process. So what is needed? Of course, an immediate ceasefire, food, water, baby formula, medication, medical treatment, shelter, toilet paper, sanitary products, soap, toys, and silence. Not the silence of our government or our institutions which refuse to speak out against the genocide, but the silence of the sky. No buzzing of drones, no screeching of attack jets, no whining of quadcopters. Silence may then allow the children to get some sleep without the fear of death stalking them, a sky where they can fly their kites again. And speaking of silence, the late Dr. Martin Luther King said, quote, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends," unquote. Gazan healthcare workers will need support themselves, as they and their children will have been through the same things as the children they are helping. Secondary trauma, the experience of being traumatized by being with others who are badly traumatized, is taken seriously. The surviving clinicians and mental health professionals need our voices, our support, our solidarity. These are courageous, highly skilled, well-trained clinicians and healthcare professionals, and they deserve our support and respect. So let's make sure we use our privilege to speak out and show our colleagues in Gaza that we see and hear them, that we stand with them, and we honour their bravery and their fight to help the babies, children and families of Gaza. Finally, I have a message from a teenage girl in Gaza with whom I have regular contact when Israel allows Wi-Fi. I asked her if she wanted to send a message to all of you. And this is what she wrote, quote, "Tell them we are very happy when we see how much they love Palestine. We hope they never forget us," unquote. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was it was fascinating. I know it was incredibly difficult to listen to. We've had a lot of comments about how that was really tough. I mean, we knew it was going to be a difficult one to get through for everyone. So thank you for coming and listening to that. And Teresa, thank you so much for your work and for talking to us about it. I posted in the chat box the DCIP Starving a Generation report, so people can see that and all the different references and resources you mentioned. When I send an email around announcing that the recording is available, I'll make sure that they're available too. I'm really happy. I just want to say that we've got a few people from some other amazing organizations who are joining us today. We've got Denise McGoran, who was for 10 years the chief surgeon at St. John Eye Hospital in Jerusalem, and also branches in Gaza and the rest of the West Bank. That eye hospital is special, and the reason why I'm raising it here in this context of children is because apparently the average age for eye hospitals is about 71. We associate it with sort of diseases to do with aging. In Gaza, the eye hospital group, a third of their patients are children. So it's a really, really important resource. And Denise still carries on doing amazing work for the eye hospital. We've also got Jamila Cope and Frank Spencer-Nairn. They're all involved with POW Music and the Spafford Center in the old city of Jerusalem. So just some amazing people joining. And this is what brings me hope, is all of these fantastic people doing amazing things. We had a question from Mira Silvacar, which I'm not going to address to you, Teresa, but I just wanted to raise it because she says she's interested in how we got to here, what has been happening here that makes us collectively appear like digressed, unhinged, cruel societies. So I wanted to raise this question because we had a really interesting webinar. The last one was with Professor Menachem Klein, who's based in Israel, who covered the radicalization of Israeli society. how they seem to be okay with what's going on. How much do they know? How okay are they with it? How did they manage to get them on board with what's happening? And we also have a whole bunch of other webinars on things like Britain's role in the region and so forth. So do check those out. We've had an interesting comment from Leica who says, is there a single web link or document with these stats and figures? And so what I wanted to suggest and ask Teresa is if perhaps with your permission, using your presentation, we can produce a little one pager or something that can easily be shared with people who might find that useful, who can then forward it to their MPs and so forth. That would be, I think, incredibly useful step forward and action plan after this webinar. But he also asks, are young people in Israel aware of what's happening to Palestinian children? Do you have any information on this?
Me?
Yeah. I don't know whether you've done any work with young people in Israel as well, or whether
I
you...
haven't. The only things I see are young people who are refusing to serve in the
Yeah.
IOF. I don't know about younger children, if they know what's happening to their counterparts.
I mean, I don't even think the adults are fully aware, to be honest. That's the impression that we got from the last webinar with Menachem Klein, that there is a lot of silence around the actual impact to everyday people in Gaza. I've got a comment from Liga. You paint a very bleak picture. I wonder what hope remains for these children to ever become functioning adults in the future. Is their trauma even in part reversible?
I think there is hope, and I'm sorry it's been so bleak, and it was upsetting writing it. But I think there's a reality to the damage being done to children. I think one of the really important things to keep in mind, from what I've been told by Palestinian friends and colleagues, is about the strength of the community, of the larger family, and that there is enormous potential healing within that. And unfortunately, those children who've lost entire families will need to find other families, and I'm sure they will find people that will be their community. I think as Perry says, once a child is removed from a situation where they're being subjected to unbearable trauma 24 hours a day, the first thing they need is some respite. And I know from working with children who've been evacuated, or their families have been given asylum in this country, working with them, one of the things that they often want to do, first of all, is in a treatment room, in a consulting room, they want to find a safe place to hide. And allowing them to do that for as long as they need to, and keeping everything very quiet, but also allowing some rhythmic play. Sometimes singing, or letting them sing, or playing them familiar music. As he says, you're looking at that lower level of brain activity, brain function, which responds to rhythm and music and dance. This is why I think we see on social media so many Palestinian children doing the dabki and the dabka, sorry for my pronunciation, and also doing breakdancing. This is so important. It's a way of reclaiming agency over their bodies. Their bodies aren't being acted on by an external element. They are choosing how and when they move their bodies. And you'll see them, they'll be in a circle surrounded by others, clapping rhythmically. And this is so important. And the incredible people who provide this work day in, day out, at risk of their own lives, I can only imagine what that's like. And again, I feel a bit awful being an outsider, because it should be a Palestinian presenting this because they know better than I do. But
You are definitely an honorary Palestinian. So don't you worry about that. And we are just happy to be able to, happy is the wrong word. We're grateful that we are able to learn more about this really, really important topic. And you are an authority on this, and it's just been a bit difficult, isn't it? We've got
there is hope. Let me say, there is hope as long as they get the right treatment and there's time and space given to them.
So what you're saying is we need peace right now so that we can focus on rebuilding, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that moves on very nicely to the sort of next question, which I love the way she phrased it. Hind Khalife, how can we support our mental health colleagues without inundating them with questions regarding how we can help, as there are so few of them working in Gaza?
Well, we do have, there are a couple of groups who we are working with in the West Bank at the moment, offering just discussions about clinical work. We don't need to teach them anything. They know what they're doing, but it's providing a space for them to talk about their work and the effect it has on them. Within the Gaza Mental Health Project, the Palestine Trauma Centre, there will be people who are supporting their colleagues. But I think we do have to keep in mind secondary trauma, because the people who are helping others are also going through the same fear for their children as the people they're working with.
Thank you for that. And also, obviously, donations to reputable organizations that are working in the region. We'll pop some links in that email that I will send out with the resources. We've got quite a few people asking if they can make use of the questions that you shared, and some saying who should reference, but the reference, the logo of the charity and the name is on the document. So I'll include that when I send out the email with all the recordings and resources. I found that very impactful in that I cried instantly because we were talking about it. Some of those words children shouldn't even know the meaning of, let alone be asking those questions. It was just, if that doesn't get someone, they're never going to be convinced that something's not right in this area. I had a comment from Fevzi, who's fellow podcaster, Bandol Ofla podcast. He asks about whether the one state and two state solution, which we won't touch on right now because we do have other webinars on it and some coming up. But he says that we should be calling for Palestine to be recognized in its own right. We do that. I posted it in the chat box. It's one of our government asks to recognize Palestine now. Palestine has a right to exist, free from fear and the grip of the occupier. But he asks, what action can we take here and now, non-medical mental health care professionals, to help these children?
I think we need to speak up for children. I think we need to let our professional associations, whatever they are, make them aware of what's happening. Join the marches wherever they are. Donate to organisations that are working in Gaza, reputable organisations like the Palestine Trauma Centre. Make yourselves, sorry, that sounds a bit patronising. We need to make ourselves, I include myself in this, constantly aware of what is happening. Reach out to Palestinians who might be working in your organisation. Support them.
Thank you for that. And we regularly at Britain Palestine Project run Email Your MP campaigns, which I know can sometimes feel like, is this really doing anything? And trust me, it does. It's the more of us that speak out, the harder we are to ignore. We can track how many of these emails each MP is receiving, which is really interesting when we go and meet with them and they claim they don't know about an issue. And we're like, well, actually, you've had many, many emails about it from your constituents, helps us in terms of understanding where the support is when we're organizing events. We've released films and we're doing film screenings at the moment. So where do we position those, where we can have the most impact around the country? So please do keep on emailing your MP, make yourself heard. I've posted some links in the chat box to, if you would consider, if anyone wants to consider making a donation to us. Like I said in the email, I'll be posting all of the links to all of the organizations and the resources that Teresa mentioned, so that you can also have a look and see if there's anyone you want to support on the ground in that way. I just really want to thank everyone, Teresa, for your work. I don't know how you do it. And everyone for coming along. And, you know, it's a beautiful sunny day and you've chosen to sit here and listen to these atrocities that are happening to children and babies. So, you know, that's an impressive act, and let's make the most of what we learned today and take it forward. So really, really, really thankful to everyone here. Like I said, this recording will be put up on the website by tomorrow, and it'll be on all of the platforms. So do share it around. Now's your last chance to pop something in the chat box if you want to leave a message for Teresa. I will share that with her so she'll see all the comments. Teresa, you've had so many messages of people saying that was so fascinating, and you know, big love to both of you. Thank you. We need it right now. All right. So we will see you all at the next one. We do have a webinar coming up. I should know the date. The next webinar is with two of our trustees, our chair, Andrew Whitley, and one of our trustees, Sir Vincent Fien, former Consul General of Jerusalem, on the topic of Palestine, Israel, challenging the British government. So what do we do with all of this information that we have about all these atrocities? How can we maybe impact them a little bit, which would be nice. That's the whole point of it all, right? So do join us. That one is at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, the 29th of July. It'll be recorded as well. Please share this or any of the webinars that you think will be interesting to all of your networks. And thank you again, Teresa, so much for all your work and for coming to speak to us. Have a lovely rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you very much, Deanna.